Bonjour tout le monde, c'est moi, Madame Norberg. I hope everybody had a really nice weekend. And um, these are our first notes that we're going to take. Sometimes I'm going to have you guys take notes at home, and this is going to be one of those times. I'm kind of excited about it because I think it'll be a little bit more of a personal experience for all of you. And I think you'll hopefully get a little bit more out of it. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about adjectives. This should be a review for most of you. Some of you it's probably been a little bit longer than others. But as you know, adjectives in French are totally different than adjectives in English. And the reason why is because, as we've already talked about, all nouns in French are either masculine or feminine. So we're going to start out by talking about the gender. So there's a bunch of different kinds of adjectives, and they change based on whether the noun is masculine or feminine. The first one we're going to talk about is masculine adjectives that already end in the letter E. And when they become feminine, you don't have to do anything to them. So that's really nice. So the word rouge, red in French, wouldn't change at all. So we would pronounce rouge, rouge. There's no difference. Now, a general rule of thumb, if an adjective ends in a consonant, and I'm pretty sure you've all seen this before, we're just going to add the letter E onto it. So I've got the word petit, and it's going to change to petite. So there's a tiny little difference. Petit, and then petite. Little tiny difference that you can hear based on the adjective, whether a word is masculine or feminine. Now I'm going to talk about words that end in an X. So if it's a masculine word that ends, and the adjective ends in an X, I'm going to change the X to an SE. So the word heureux is going to change to heureuse. And that one you can definitely hear the difference. Heureux and heureuse. Now we're going to talk about ones that end in the letter F. If you have an adjective that ends in F, you're going to change the F to a VE. So sportif, Roxy, my dog is snoring. So sportif would change to sportive. Sportif, masculine, sportive, feminine. Now for adjectives that end in G, and this is kind of a tricky one, you have to add the letters UE on the end. So we've got long would change to long, long, long. And then finally, adjectives that end in L, you add an LE onto it. So gentil would change to gentille, gentil, gentille. So pretty much for all of them, you can hear the difference between masculine and feminine, except for the ones that didn't actually change. Now, moving on to plural. So just like you had to add letters based on whether words are masculine or, I said that right. Add letters based on whether words are masculine or feminine. You also have to add letters in French on if a word is plural. So what that's going to look like is if you have a word that is masculine and singular, like grand, to make it plural, you're going to add an S on it. So grand would be the masculine singular one. Where's my mouse? Grand would change grand. Now the pronunciation doesn't change at all. Now if you remember, because it ends in a consonant, to make it feminine, we add an E on there, grande. So now if I want to make this word plural, I have to add an S on there, grande. So basically, pronunciation doesn't change when you add an S on the end of a word in French. And that is a very important thing to remember. Now, when you have a word that ends in an S, like gris, to make it plural, you don't have to add anything. You don't want to add two S's onto the end. That would look a little bit weird in French. So I've got gris and grille. Now, to make it feminine, if you remember, we added an E, grise. Now to make that plural, I'm just going to add my S onto the end of the feminine word, grise. So again, these pronunciations are not going to change. Masculine, feminine sound a little bit different, but because I added an S on there, it doesn't change. And finally, words that end in an EUX, to make those plural, same thing as I did with the S. I don't have to add anything on there to change it. Now, if you recall, when it ends in an X, to make it feminine, I change it to an SE, so erz. That one I can add an S onto because it seems okay to add an S on the end of a word that looks like that. Whereas if it ends in an X, you wouldn't want to add another letter on there. And this would be pronounced erz. So pretty much all you're doing to make things plural is adding an S. If it already ends in an S or the letter X, you don't want to change it. Once you've added some letters on there to make them feminine, then it's okay to add the letter S back on there. Now, of course, there's some exceptions because, it's French. I think most of you probably remember these adjectives. The word beautiful in French is beau. To make beau plural, you would just add an X. Now, pronunciation isn't going to change. Beau, beau. Now, this is a weird little thing we've got going on here. Because in French, they want it to sound nice. When you have a word that is masculine, but begins with a vowel, you can't have like baume or botel. So instead, they change it to bel homme, bel hotel. Now, feminine for the word beau is belle. I'm sure you've all seen that before. And then to make that plural, you're going to add the letter S on there. But they're not going to change pronunciation because remember, you don't want to change your pronunciation with the letter S at the end. Now, the word new, nouveau, going to follow the same rule. To make it plural, I'm going to add an X. If there's a vowel like nouveau, that sounds horrible. Nouvel homme, nouvel hotel. If I have a word that's feminine, it's nouvelle. And to make it plural, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add the letter S onto that. Finally, the word old, vieux, vieux. Now, because it already ends in an X, just like we've already talked about, you can't add another X on there, so it's going to stay the same, vieux. If it's before a vowel, you don't want to say vieux homme, so we say vieil homme, vieil hotel. Feminine singular, it's a tricky little word, vieil. And to make it plural, I'm just going to add the letter S on there. Just a reminder, my pronunciation won't change. Vieil, vieil. Okay, so there's all of the forms. Some tricky little words. The word orange, marron, sympa, and chic are never going to change. So it doesn't matter if they're masculine, feminine, singular, plural, they're always going to look exactly the same. And I think you guys might have talked about that in French 1, but just in case you didn't. And there's a few other ones too, but these are the ones that are probably the most common. Orange, marron, sympa, and chic. Okay, now the order. This is the crazy part. So in French, adjectives go after the noun. So like in English, we would say, I have a red car. In French, you would say, I have a car red. I have a yellow house. I have a house yellow. It sounds crazy to us, but in French, it just sounds normal. It sounds crazy to them that we say, I have a red car, or I have a yellow house. So in French, adjectives go after the noun. So I've got Mario Kart est un jeu vidéo amusant. So my adjective goes after. Mario Kart est un jeu vidéo amusant. Oh, I always like to be the quacker when I play Mario Kart. Un deuxième exemple. J'ai deux chiennes énergiques. I have two energetic dogs. Again, my adjective comes after. Now notice there's an S on there because deux chiennes is plural, so I had to make sure I added an S on there. And there's my cute dogs. The black one, this one right here is Roxy, and that's Sarge. And they're crazy. Okay, finally, I've got à LCHS. Il y a beaucoup d'élèves intelligents. At Lake Zurich High School, there are a lot of smart students. So a couple things. Remember, it comes after. And I have an S on here because élève is plural. So it's a weird, crazy, tricky rule that takes some time to get used to, but it's the opposite in French as it is in English. Now, that being said, it's French, right? So, of course, there's some exceptions. There's this bags adjective thing that, again, I think you guys probably talked about in French 1. Bags adjectives is just kind of an acronym for any adjectives that are going to come before the noun. So in the normal order like we do in English. And bag stands for beauty, age, goodness, and size. When I say beauty, I'm pretty much just talking about like the word beautiful and pretty. When I say age, I'm mostly talking about old, young, and new. When I say goodness, I'm literally just talking about the word good or bad. And finally, for size, this is kind of a tricky one. It's pretty much when you're just talking about like up and down, like the size of a person, like tall or short. So I'm going to talk about, oh, I forgot the S. So I'm going to talk about Taylor Swift. So I've got Taylor Swift est une belle fille. So belle is going to be for goodness. I'm sorry, that's not right. It's for beauty. And so it comes before. Notice I've got the feminine form because fille is feminine. So I'm going to make sure I use the feminine form of belle and it's going to come before. Taylor Swift est une jeune fille. Jeune is going to be my adjective for age. Taylor Swift est une bonne chanteuse. Taylor Swift is a good singer, kind of. And then the last one, Taylor Swift est une grande fille. She is a tall girl. So again, normally in French, my adjectives are going to come after, but these are some of my exceptions. And then you'll notice that all of these are feminine because all of the nouns that I used in these sentences are feminine. Okay, I know it was kind of a lot. I hope it all makes sense. What I'm going to ask you guys to do for tonight for your homework to finish up is to translate these sentences into French for me. Okay? Ok, j'espère que vous avez compris. À demain!